So, welcome for another episode of AWA Agora's talk show. We are really happy to have all of you here. Those of you who are coming here for the first time, we started this forum so that we could all connect on our um, thought leadership conversations, where we can, stay connected through this crazy year of COVID and other things, and continue to have a dialogue so that we can contribute to our zeitgeist. Um, this is our ninth episode on this season, and we have one more on next Thursday. But we also have our Zoom festival on Saturday, which starts at 9 a.m. and goes on till 1 p.m. with nine different speakers from all over the world. So I hope several of you, would join us at that time as well. And today we have Joel Bergner here with us. He's currently in London, but he's a fellow New Yorker who's there with his family right now in London because his wife is from London. And I got to know Joel when through Gallery AWA, we were trying to do a show with the displaced people and the displaced Syrian people who were living mostly in Germany. And during, what, so I went to Germany, I met with many of the artists, but one of my team members here found Joel and his group called Artolution, which had been doing phenomenal work all over the world. So I was like, wait, somebody's already doing all this amazing work. We have to meet them, you know? So we did a few emails. They were in our neighborhood about a mile away in Brooklyn, came to our gallery. We had great conversations. And since then, I've stayed in touch. Of course, we then moved to Chelsea and we left our place in Brooklyn. And Joel has been traveling all over the world. Yeah. And welcome, Joel. Really great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Great, Abhay, thank you so much. It's good to be here, and I'm glad we have all these great people here with us. So thanks, everyone.
Super, super. So, Joel, tell us a little bit about your group Artolution for those of us who are new to the name. I mean, obviously, several of us are aware of it, but just to kind of get
Yeah.
everybody up to speed, yeah.
Great. Well, Artolution is a nonprofit organization. We are based in New York, but we do have programming going in various parts of the world, which I'll be discussing today. And I think the best way to describe it is from the perspective of one of the participants in our programming. So let's pretend that you are a girl named Noor. Let's say you're 11 years old. This is a real person who I know. And you're in a Syrian refugee camp called Azraq in Jordan in the desert. And you've come from the Syrian war. Your family has lost everything. You've lost loved ones. You've lost your home. You've experienced trauma that nobody should experience, especially not a child like Noor. And then you cross over the desert, you cross the border, and you end up in a place safer, but at the same time it's a desert refugee camp, and there's not a lot of opportunities, and you're kind of stuck there, right? And so you get connected to some of the different organizations there, and there's something called Artolution, and what that is you go and you get to participate in this big public arts program in which you're working with local artists who also live in the camp, 5 men, 5 women. They're all Syrian as well, like you. And you are creating this giant mural, this whole series of murals in your community center that you will then get to see after that for many years. And so you go there, and the first thing the artist says to you is, not, this is what we're going to do, everyone, but Noor, what do you want to see on our mural? This is your mural. And what do you want to see? What is your message for the world? What are your dreams for the future? What are the most important things going on in your family, in your community, in your life? Let's talk about that. And you and all of your peers, you come up with this big list, and then you all draw, make sketches of some of your visions. And then the artists guide you through the process of designing your own mural. And after that, the next day you come back, they say, where are your worst clothes? Because you're gonna get splattered with paint. So don't wear anything too nice. And so you come back the next day, and for the rest of the week, sometimes this goes on for several weeks, you are creating these big, bright, beautiful murals. And they have their professional elements and they have this kind of overall composition. But at the same time, all the children get to come and paint their sections as well. And so the artists say, one day you come and they say, okay, in this section of the wall, Noor, we want you to envision your future. What is the future that you want to see for your community, for your country, for yourself? Let's think about that. And so you go and you're able to draw that vision on that section of the wall. And on another day, they say, okay, we're going to actually learn how to do portraiture today. And you're going to create a portrait of someone who you admire, who supports you, who's positive in your life. And Noor says, okay, I'm going to draw my teacher. There's this one teacher that I really love, and I'm going to make a portrait of her on the wall. And so, and so by the end, you have not only created this work of art, but you've made incredible connections and positive relationships with the other children and with these artists who you can look up to, who you have this relationship with. And at the end, there's this big celebration and people come and they say, wow, Noor and all of you, you've done this incredible work. We love what you've done. Tell us more about it. And you know, people are listening to you and you're telling your story and people are really paying attention to what you have to say. And that's never happened before in your life. This has never happened before. People haven't paid that much attention to what you have to say and really valued your voice. And so that is kind of, when I think of Artolution, I always like to think of it, what is it, how is it experienced by the participants? And that's that's how it's experienced. And one of the most important things about it is that it's collaborative, it's arts based, and all of the lead artists are local artists. And for many of our communities in places like Uganda and Bangladesh and Colombia, they are members of the community who are also marginalized, who are also either refugees or come from a background of conflict. And so Artolution provides the experience and the capacity building, as well as the livelihood, because all of these artists are paid for their work. Many of them feed their families throughout the entire year based on this work. And so that's something that we really focus on a lot, is that the beneficiaries of the projects are not only the participants, but also the ones leading the projects. They actually have a purpose in life through these projects. And so we do murals, as I mentioned, and we also do performance. We do community sculptures. We do, and I'll get into a little bit later, some of our virtual work that we've been doing since the pandemic began. And so that is Artolution in a nutshell.
Beautiful. So inspiring. Thanks, man. Thanks for sharing. It's so beautiful what you do, because I've been following you on Facebook. I've seen your postings, and it just blows you away, because what you're doing is you're getting in this positivity with art and color and giving them the freedom in a really tough situation that they're in. It's, I mean, not one of them would have wanted to be a refugee and leave their house. So, I mean, giving them an outlet for doing something new, and doing something creative and innovative is so powerful. So tell me, what was the catalyst for Artolution?
Well, I think it all kind of starts for me personally, when I was younger and when I was a teenager, and, like so many people, the teenage years are hard, right? A lot is going on, life is changing, things are a bit chaotic. And, for me, one of my challenges is that I was actually a teenage father. And so that was something that was very overwhelming for me, although my son and I have been close ever since then. He's big now, but, he's been a really special part of my life. And but being a teenager and having those kinds of challenges, and having things that feel overwhelming, that feel or out of your control, I think that one thing I recognized during that time was that art, and for me it was drawing and painting, but it can be any form of art. That's something that you have control over all of a sudden. That's something that you can go and it's your thing, and you can express yourself, you can tell your story, you can express your emotions, you can do whatever you want in a world where maybe that doesn't usually feel like that. But in this one way, you can do that. And when I got older, and I was living in Chicago, and then I moved out to California, and I was doing a lot of community work. So I worked with the homeless, and I worked with, for years, I was a counselor with teenagers who had been through a lot of trauma and neglect and abuse, and really, really severe cases. And that's one thing I noticed about them as well, is that when it came to the arts, some of the kids they couldn't pay attention in school. They were, everything was chaotic. But when they got in a dance routine, or when they got to be able to make music, or when they got to draw or paint, whatever it was that was their interest, right? That was suddenly, it was like everything was crazy, and all of a sudden, zoop, they could focus. And all of a sudden, they would work on a dance routine for like 3 hours in a row. It's like insane.
Whoa.
You're like, how could you concentrate like that when you can't concentrate on anything else? And so it really just hit me like, it's not just me, it's people in general, and especially people going through challenges in life. The arts are a way to really focus. The arts are that way that you can tell your own story, that you can express yourself. And so that kind of carried me on to being able to start doing these projects where I combined public art and murals with doing the community work and with working with youth who had been through trauma. And I experimented. At first, it was a bit of a disaster. I had no idea what I was doing. But over time, I started to recognize some of the techniques that really worked really well. And I loved murals. I loved public art, especially because that was something that really could, be out there in the community and really
Right.
be part of the community. And so that was what really interested me. And so I would bring youth and kids and bring community members in on the projects. And one thing led to another. And I ended up getting opportunities working with organizations in places like Brazil and places like Kenya. And I was recognizing that all of these very different environments, it really works. This idea of bringing people together to create collaborative art together, it really works. And so that was kind of the whole background. That's where it all came from. And I think the last thing that I'll say that was really the final inspiration was being in the Syrian refugee camps, which I've been going to since 2013, almost every year since then, and seeing that I can come in as a outsider, and we can do an incredible project, but there are these amazing local artists there, and
Mm.
and local educators.
Right.
And when I met them and when I was working with them, I said to myself, well, this shouldn't end. This shouldn't, if I, just because I might leave and go back
Mm.
home, but this is their home. And so why can't they have their own program? Why can't they be doing this all year round with the kids? That would be so much more impactful than just me coming in for a couple months or something. I mean, they're here all the time, and this is their culture. This is their kids. This should be something. And so I realized by connecting with my co-founder in Artolution, Max Frieder, and some other people that became our board of directors, that there were a
Right.
lot of people passionate about this,
Super.
and that we needed to build an infrastructure. We needed to build an organization. This
Yeah.
wasn't something that just one or two people could do alone.
Yeah.
And from there, we built it up and now have created this organization that has programs all over the world.
That's beautiful. Yeah. But I've got to ask you a question. I mean, while you were talking, I mean, every time I've spoken to you, I've gone away just super inspired. But I have a question for you. So what you're doing is so beautiful, and it's almost like, why aren't more people doing this? Right? We know the value of art. We know the value of music and healing, in mental health, in as an outlet for your troubles, if you would, whether it's listening to music or playing music, or or sketching, or I know that if I need to do some real thinking, I have to sketch and I have to cook. Those are my two ways of figuring things out, in a way, besides meditation. But the point I'm making is that what you're doing is helping so many people. But what is your special formula that is making such an impact? What is it about you, Artolution, you and Max, that's making such an impact?
Well, I think really it's very simple, and the answer is that art is universal. There's people everywhere doing art, and I think people recognize that it's an outlet. But
Mhm.
the difference is, how do you collaborate? If you
Around.
have 20 people in front of you, let's say you have 20 teenagers, right? And you might be an artist. Let's say you're a painter, maybe you do murals, but you're used to creating your own mural. And of course it'd be easy to say, okay, kid, you paint this part blue and you paint this part red. And, I know what we're doing, everyone, just follow me. Of course, that would be easy. That's what some people do. But how do you not do that? And instead, how do you go and say, okay, everyone, we're going to create something together and everyone's ideas are welcome. And we're going to include everyone's ideas. That part is like, for a lot of artists would be like, ooh,
Mm.
how are we going to do that? Right. And so
Yeah, yeah.
over the years, and it's not just us, we have a lot of artists. We have over 60 artists all over the world. Many of them have brought their own techniques to the table, and we're always expanding and we're always, it's about everybody, and what are the ways that this can be effective? And collecting all of those techniques, all of the best practices, we've written a guide, basically a training manual that's over 90 pages long. It goes through all these different techniques that artists can use for this type of work. And I think that's the piece. How can you collaborate, create these things collaboratively? That's the piece that I think really gets people. And they're like, okay, now it goes from something that's very individual and it becomes something that all kinds of people, even many of our participants, may have never touched a paintbrush. They may have never done these things before. It doesn't matter. They don't have to have any particular background at all. It's specifically designed for any kind of person to participate together.
Wow. So collaborative process,
Yes.
encouraging their own individuality to come out while working with 5, 6, 10 artists at the same time who have their own ways of doing things. But do you find that that you spend some amount of time dealing with any ego-driven issues between the artists, or you
Oh yeah, ego is always an issue, right?
there's always the
Especially the
issue?
men. The men are the worst. It's always the men.
Yeah,
Yes, ego, especially with artists, is a big deal.
yeah.
And that's the thing you got to let go. So we were working, one of
How do you
our
how do you do that? That's what I'm
well,
asking.
we basically get. It's important to communicate and make sure that people understand that a successful collaborative arts-based project is one in which all of the ideas of everyone, even if some of it's a bit rough, right? Is we're not dealing with everyone's a professional, right? That's okay. That's part of the beauty of it. And I love that kind of rough and raw kind of energy that comes from people who this is their first time out there doing this, and they might come up with something beautiful that is rough and raw, but it's beautiful and it's inspiring and it's something that a more trained artist would never even come up with.
Right.
I know Picasso has a quote about that, about how artists are always trying to get back to that child who can just go out there with a clear mind and just create something and not be scared.
Yeah.
And so that's not the exact quote. I forgot the exact quote.
Yeah, no,
Something
I know
like that.
what you're saying, though. I've heard the
Yeah.
quote.
But
Just come back and connect with your inner child. Freud talked about it too.
yeah.
Picasso built on it too, about connecting with your inner child, which is where the true art comes out because that's where the innocence is. Yeah, no, I know which quote you're referring to. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, but so I think one of our artists in Colombia, his name is Kevin. He's really really inspiring guy. He's a dancer, and he comes from a super rough area. It's called Agua Blanca, which is in Cali, and in this community, there's a lot of gang conflict. You can't go 2 blocks that way or that way because that's a different faction that lives there. It's a really intense environment, and he's just an incredibly inspiring person. He's young. He's very young himself. He's around 20, and he's just gone out there. Before we connected with him, he had no resources at all. No, he wasn't being paid at all. He just went out there and got the youth together, and they did dance performances.
Wow.
And he was such a positive force in the community. And we said, we want to invest in this guy, right? And we said, Kevin, there's just one thing. It can't be just you out there saying, hey, everyone, this is the choreography. Follow me. It has to be
Collaborative. Yeah.
collaborative, and I want you to figure out what are all the ideas, what's a narrative that we can create together through this dance performance, and how can all of these youth that are working with you, how can they all contribute to that? And at first that was challenging for him. He's like, oh, I don't understand, how am I supposed to do that, and so but over time he learned to value that, and by the end he was like, yes, I get it, like this is amazing, it's actually much better than just me doing that. It's actually amazing to have everyone's ideas. It makes it stronger, it makes it more creative. I feel the energy. And so he embraced it eventually, and then he took it on as his own. And so I think that's kind of the story of getting rid of that ego and bringing in the voices of everyone.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Listen, I had one more question, but I It's 25 minutes we've been talking, and I didn't even realize how time flew by. So why don't we do this? Why don't we jump ahead to your anecdotes and stories from the different contexts that you've worked in? Because I'm sure the audience is just dying to see visuals on this. And then we can circle back to the other questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, great.
So,
Okay, so yeah, I'll talk about some of our some of our different youth and artists. One thing that I think is really important is this idea that as someone who's been marginalized, as someone who is vulnerable, to be able to tell your own story and shape
mhm,
your own identity, that's a critical issue, and that's something that the arts can play a big role in. So I'll give an example of that, which is Alina. She was one of our young people in Romania, and she had lived out on the streets. She had been homeless, and she became part of a group of circus performers that were all young people, including children much younger than her. She was now had become older. She was now an older teenager, and some of them were young kids. And she
mhm,
became this mentor for them, right? And we created this giant mural all together, all of the youth in this program. And through the mural, they were able to create these visions of themselves as they saw themselves and as they wanted the world to see them,
wonderful.
because society had placed labels on them. So you're homeless, you're a street kid, you're poor, all of these negative labels. We know all these labels, right?
Right.
And that gets into the psyche of a person, especially a young person,
Sure.
and that can really set them on this path.
Sure.
That's a limiting path in life after that. And so what we did is we created this mural where they all were in the mural, and they were all in there were clowns, and they were performers, they were artists, and all the ways that they saw themselves. And
Uh-huh.
that was this way to say, you know we we know that there's these negative labels, but we reject those, and we're going to decide who we are. We
Yeah.
are going to tell the world what our actual narrative is. And I am actually
Okay.
not a homeless kid or anything. I'm actually a performer. I'm an artist. I'm a clown. I'm going to decide who I am. And I think that's the thing that we really stress in these projects, is to make sure that all of the children and all of the participants know that they have the power to create that story for themselves.
Fantastic. Is there other examples that we can that you can share? I believe Justin has some files that he can pull up.
Yeah, you can search some of the photos. I know we have some photos from the Syrian refugee camp in Jordan, and from Uganda and Colombia. I think we have photos from all of those places. So yeah, I'll talk about a few more of these are the kids in the Syrian refugee camp here, and
Mhm.
you can see the joy, and these are kids who have been through a lot. They've been through a lot of struggle, but this is the power of the arts, to really be able to have the opportunity to go and create and be, and form positive relationships. And so life might be hard, but through the arts you can actually have this bit of joy, as you see here.
And this is in Jordan, is it?
Yes, this is in Jordan. There's this is in the Azraq refugee camp. There's also the Zatari refugee camp, and there's also many refugees that we work with and other affected communities in general, all across the region. So it's not only people who live in camps. There's a lot of really difficult situations happening.
Sure.
And so you have murals like this one, and so you have this desert with no plants, no color, and all of a sudden you have this beautiful, bright mural created by all of the participants, the kids, the artists. And so this is something that people can then live with after that. And that's what I love about public art. It's something that can then live on in the community.
Sure.
And this is Samir. That's me with the hat, and then Samir there. And Samir is one of our lead artists. And he's such an inspirational figure because he himself, as I mentioned, all of these artists, they came from Syria, the ones who live in this camp. So Samir came over, and he actually, as he fled his country, he was shot and survived being shot. And the reason why he was almost killed was because he fled the military. And during the beginning of the war, he recognized, if I join the military, I will have to kill civilians. That's what's happening, and I don't agree with this, and I am not going to go along with that. I'm going to to leave, but it's very dangerous to not accept being in the military. So he took his wife and his small children, and they fled. He survived the attack on him. They fled across the desert, and they ended up in this refugee camp. And Samir now, after going through all of that, you would think he would just be hopeless and desperate and just he would not be able to do anything positive with his life. But instead, he is this leader, this positive person in the community who's giving back to kids all year round.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Ah, look at that.
Yeah. And I'll talk about, you can just kind of show these photos, and I'll talk about one other thing that's I think is important through these projects. As you can see that our normal projects, there's people all put together, they're all close together, right? Everyone's in person. You can tell this is pre-COVID, this picture here, right?
Right.
And so one thing I think that's important is how to connect these different communities in these very different areas of the world. We work in the United States. We work in Uganda, we work in Bangladesh. How do you connect all of these different places? And so we've really been able to, we've created a program called Virtual Bridges. And we just had actually just today, we had one of our final events after a month of girls, teenage girls from Uganda and from Colombia meeting online to do theater-based projects. And the girls from Uganda, this picture here is from where they are living now, which is the Bidi Bidi refugee settlement. And that's for people coming from South Sudan, right over the border of South Sudan.
All the way from South Sudan to Uganda.
Yeah. And so these are some of the kids there. And so for them to have this experience of getting online, getting them internet was not easy. This is a very remote area.
Right.
It's 12 hours from the capital. And we were able to bring internet there and then train the local artists there that we work with how to lead virtual projects as well as in-person projects. And so, and this here is Colombia now. So this is the other part of the equation, right? So the kids in Colombia and the kids in Uganda meeting and creating an entire song and dance and theatrical performance together online. And so we've done a lot of these projects, especially during the pandemic. We actually developed it before COVID because we were just interested in how can we bring these communities together.
Where was the previous photo from? Is that Colombia or is that?
Yeah, that's Colombia also. Yeah, these are all Colombia here. This is an Afro-Colombian community.
Yeah.
And this is in Agua Blanca in Cali. And so, it's been these experiences where you have young people coming together and the artists and being able to meet each other, being able to connect. And we've done a lot of new art forms that we weren't doing before. We've done digital art collaborations. We've done a lot of animation, like stop motion animation. And so we've created these collaborative pieces together in which it gives this opportunity for them to learn so much about another culture that's different than when you just watch like a documentary or something. When you're actually able to ask somebody your own age directly, and their name and they're right there in front of you on the screen, and you say, what was your experience like leaving a war? Or, what do you guys eat for breakfast? Or show me a dance you guys do over there. What do you guys like? How do you guys dance over there? Or any question, whether it's something fun or whether it's something really deep and serious. And you see this picture here, we're starting to experiment with virtual reality art making. And so Diana, which is the girl there in the virtual headset. So this is still Colombia here. And she was able to connect with kids in Brooklyn and her peers. And they did a bunch of projects together. But one that was interesting was getting together and creating art in virtual spaces. For Diana, this was something that was just mind-blowing, to get into a 3D space and create sculptures, create artwork, but also to meet other people in another country, in this case in Brooklyn, and to share these experiences. You can get in this virtual space and chat together, make art together. And so this is something that is not done very much. It's not something that's generally part of humanitarian work or work with marginalized groups. And so this is something that we think is a really important tool for moving forward with this kind of work.
So, oh wow, look at that. That's beautiful. Oh, Here's a
Yeah, this
question.
is in Uganda here, this one.
Communication, right? Sorry. I know you speak several languages. I know you speak Portuguese, Spanish, English for sure. Uh, um, do you also speak Arabic and or did you?
Uh, I am studying Arabic and I'm terrible.
What about Bengali? Do you speak Bengali too?
No, no, I don't. I don't speak Bengali. You know, I learned a little bit when I was there, and the Rohingya language is very similar
Uh-huh.
to Bangla or Bengali.
Yeah.
And so we work with a lot of Rohingya artists and youth in Bangladesh. So yeah, so I try to learn a little bit of whatever language I'm spending time in.
Mhm.
Um, but what I'm actively studying right now is Arabic. So I think in about 20 years I'll be fluent.
Okay. Well, that will get me to the. No, I'm sorry. Are there more images like any that you like to? Oh, look at that. Ah,
Oh, this is my wife and our daughter Amara. And so my wife is the head of the performance programs for Artolution. And so we travel all over the world together with our daughter. Now we have another daughter that was born recently. So this picture is about a year old or so. And so yeah, so we are a traveling family, and it's been a bit crazy. It's been sometimes fun, sometimes stressful, but Amara has been to she's been to Lebanon, she's been to the Syrian refugee camp, she's been to Uganda, before the age of 3. She had been to about 12 different places around the world, and so she's a
wow.
very she was a traveling baby until the pandemic.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Oh, this is a video. So if you want to show the video, this is something that shows our. I've been talking a lot about our murals, but this shows our performance program, and it shows this in the community of Agua Blanca that I mentioned, which is in
Mhm.
Colombia.
For me personally in my life, art has always been a tool that I use when I need to express something that I feel like I can't do any other way. And I feel the same for so many of the kids that we're working with, especially in our group of dance and theatre.
Yo creo que es una metodología nueva de pensar en narrativa, en pensar en el objetivo de la danza, o sea, no solamente el movimiento en sí mismo, pero qué está atrás del movimiento y cómo se puede comunicar eso. Por ejemplo, tenemos algunos niños en nuestro equipo de danza que en los primeros días ni hablaban, ni se acercaban al grupo, al ciclo, a los ejercicios, y ahora están súper metidos.
Esto permitió que muchos de los, digamos, de los jóvenes, de los otros jóvenes de la comunidad también quisieran hacer como parte de ese grupo. O sea, Artolution lo que ha hecho es explorar cualidades.
Sería bacano que las personas que estaban metidas en el vicio, en todas las cosas, vinieran aquí a ensayar con nosotros, que es chévere.
Pusimos como el tema de los barrios de por acá, que se están enfrentando en una guerra. Entonces no quisimos como colocarle tanta violencia y hicimos como una batalla, pero en raíz.
Creo que es súper necesario que se sigan generando estos espacios artísticos en sectores vulnerables y que los chicos se puedan llevar esa semilla cada uno en su corazón para transformar y para seguir transformando nuestro entorno.
And then this one is on the Rohingya, the work that you did with the Rohingya, yeah?
Yes, and this was made by Global Citizen, this video here, but it's about our Artolution program there.
Mogi ablahade rara den tudura dia mura mura lora lora yang tudura dia haramo ke itu lah dah jono hodere golla gere yamona tona fora velai sabi akadile golla ge fakumati begina ki dong lera kashi kayere ine area fulaki area gaso biaki Sundugudaki kala talarne ligai amutu gora zabata thayara amutai सब तभी आकर खुशी लगे पंचन दिखले बात दिखले खुशी लगे फारते लगे आई डरे रे सब आकर तो साई तो कर के बंदे कर तो साई अंत डरे सब आकर तो साई सब आकर तो साई फंड तो कर लगे वन सब आकर तो साई वंदरे फंड तो एडिया मोनो तो फारा लगे Wonder mati begini hati soya kade.
So I should say that that video was made actually a couple years ago. So since then, this has become one of our biggest programs. And so kids like Johanny that you met there, you know, we've now been able to serve thousands of children like that, and our teaching artists, most of whom are Rohingya, and then also many of whom are also Bengali as well. And we are more than 20 artists now leading multiple projects at a time. So this is something that has really affected many lives. And so, you know, really making a difference over there. And that's the biggest refugee camp in the world, that one
Balukhali.
in Bangladesh. Yeah.
Balukhali is the biggest in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Altogether, there's a series of camps, Balukhali and a couple others. They've turned into what they call the mega camp. And that's the largest refugee community in the world. Yeah.
All right, let me try to get to the next question. So these things, these skills that they're learning, right, through the times that they're in the camps and during COVID, there was a conversation that we started, which was how would they pivot this post-COVID? And that kind of ties into the next question, which is, what is your plan for Artolution over the next 10 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, you know, one thing that we've seen is that these types of collaborative arts programs are really important for the humanitarian responses to crises. And we've seen that they do provide these impacts, and this has been recognized by many large institutions like the United Nations refugee organization, which is called UNHCR, as well as UNICEF. We've worked with the Red Cross, Save the Children. We've worked with various governments as well, government agencies from many countries. And so what we've seen, you know, these aren't people who you know, are in the business of art making or doing these kinds of things. They're in a very serious humanitarian, they want that humanitarian impact, and they're working with people who are in crisis. And so for them to recognize and to invest in this types of programs and bringing Artolution in to start new programs in these communities, I think really shows that it is something that is now being recognized. And I think that's what we are hoping to see in 5 years and 10 years, is that the arts, and especially collaborative arts and public spaces, for this to be something that is part of any response, any global response to crises, is that this has a place. And, you know, when you look at something like mental health, for example, there's a mental health pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid there are people who provide therapy. There are, you know, there's the clinical side, and that's not what we do. That's very, very important, but that's not what we do exactly. But then there's another level of the pyramid. And in that part, it's all about building resilience and strengthening resilience within a community in crisis. It's all about building community relations and lowering tensions and working on issues like domestic violence that are tearing communities apart. And in that part of the mental health response, the arts are critical. And that's a really important way that the arts can be used as a tool to build up communities. And so when we look at, you know, what role do we want to play as Artolution, and also in this field in general of community-based public art, where do we want this to fit in? We think that this can be a really big part of the future of humanitarian responses around the world and to education in emergency settings. And so that's where we really want to see this go.
That's fantastic. That's really inspiring, Joel. And thank you for sharing. I mean, the videos were definitely really touching. Yeah. And I mean, we see a lot of this on independent media, etc. But being there in the middle of it, and like you said, you know, that it's not like you're in a documentary or seeing a documentary, you're actually talking to the people and feeling it three-dimensionally, feeling their pain, feeling their trauma, and then helping them with art. And it's such a, I mean, you know, when I got into architecture and then lighting, the whole idea was that there was some nobility to it to make the world a better place. And what you have done over the years that you've been doing this is given a lot of us so much inspiration and how else we can help the world, you know, with our skill set, you know. And for that, I'm extremely thankful. You have really inspired me again. Every time I see you, I get supercharged. And I wish you all the best. I hope you will, you know, reach out to us if in any way we can help in terms of doing a fundraiser or whatever you need, you know. Yeah, boy, that was great. Thank you. Thank you, Joel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for everyone for listening as well.
Take care, huh?
All right, take care.
Thank you. And for everybody who's here on Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are going to start our Zestival, the AWA Agora Zestival. So hopefully you will join us. It's a star lineup of rock stars from around the world, excluding me, but the other 8 are amazing. Look forward to seeing many of you there. And thank you again, Joe.
All right, thank you too.
Bye.
Take care, bye-bye.
Bye.